So yeah, my name's Mark. I'm a teacher in the UK, so I teach music tech at a college. I'm also an Ableton certified trainer, and I'm a big Max and Max for Live enthusiast. So as JB mentioned, today I'm doing a bit of just a short presentation on the Live API and the course that JB's posted a link to, the free course. I'm going to use some of the patches and devices that are on that course. So if you see any of the devices I'm using today, they're like demo devices I've made to demonstrate how the Live API works. If you see anything you want to kind of play with, they're all available for the course. So if you sign up for the free course, you'll get access to all of the project files and videos. And as JB said, it is quite dense. There's a lot that goes into it. So it'd be impossible to try to cover it all in like 10 or 15 minutes now. So I'm just going to do a bit of here's some of the cool things you can do with the Live API. And then if you want to follow it up, yeah, that course is there for you. And it's, yeah, definitely check that out if you want to. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Hopefully you can all see and hear. Cool. Okay. So first of all, we should just really address what is the Live API. So if you've used Max for Live before, you can build Max for Live devices without using the Live API. So the Live API, the API stands for Application Programming Interface. As someone who's not really, I don't really have like a strong background in programming. I came into it as just someone using Ableton and learning how Max works. I had to kind of learn it really from the ground up and a lot of trial and error. What the Live API does, it's kind of like accessing the software that is Ableton Live. It's like a communication or a connection between Max and Ableton Live. So it means we can build things in Max or Max for Live that control aspects of Ableton Live. So we can kind of access the kind of backbone, the kind of very architecture of how Ableton Live works. And we can do things, we can control things that we wouldn't usually be able to access to. So if you think about, if you've used Ableton Live and maybe you've used a MIDI controller and you've assigned a MIDI controller to various aspects of Ableton Live to control maybe the mixer or effects or whatever, you know, you're accessing a part of what Ableton Live offers. But with the Live API, it goes a heck of a lot deeper and you can really reach out to lots more areas that wouldn't usually be available. For me, it's probably one of the most exciting parts of Max for Live because it lets you do some really creative things. It lets you come up with devices that maybe improve it from your perspective, what Ableton Live is and how it works. You can do things that Ableton Live doesn't do straight out of the box, for example. So, you know, Max for Live, you might be building things like instruments, like synths and samplers or MIDI effects or audio effects. But with Max for Live and the API, you can go so much further than that. So again, there's a lot of devices that I've made that are available through the free course, and there's presentations as well that go through all of the theory, which I'm just going to skate over it in this session because I haven't got that much time. But you can see in this project here, I've got a few devices. Now, these are really simple devices. These are just showing that we're able to kind of access things in Ableton Live. So a really quick demo, this device down here is me just using some of the Max objects that you may have seen before. So we've got objects like live.path, live.object, live.observer, live.remote. And these are like special Max objects that have been designed to work with the Live API. So you can see with this one here, I'm using live.object and I'm sending a message which is set mute 1, and you can see that that's controlling the mute on track 1. So I'm kind of muting and unmuting the track. So not super exciting at this stage, and you might be thinking about why on earth would I need to do that. The principle is the way this has been kind of created, this patch, the principle applies to almost everything that you would work with through the Live API. So working with some really simple things to begin with, like taking control of the mixer, when you're faced with something else further down the line, you're constructing your messages and your commands in the same way. We can see that this track's got a name. It's called part 1, and I can send messages to the live object like get name. So I'm doing two things here, which is useful to know. I'm sending information into a Max object on this device that is then filtering out into Ableton Live and controlling something on the track. In this case, it's controlling the mute button on the mixer, but I'm also able to send a message to the live object, and that's retrieving something from Ableton Live. In this case, it's looking at the track that the device is on, looking at the name, and it's pulling the name out and printing it within my Max object. So again, not super exciting or useful device, but it demonstrates that kind of connectivity between Ableton Live and Max for Live. Here's another one. This is Live Observer. This lets me observe a particular property, in this case of the track. So I've told it to observe the property, which is solo. So there's my solo button there. And you'll see that as I turn solo on in Ableton Live, it's reporting it in my device. So I get a 1 or a 0 or a toggle every time I solo or unsolo the track. So that's really interesting to know. So what's happening there is that observer is constantly watching the property I've told it to look at. So it's like always watching, and it reports back. So that's another way of pulling information from Ableton Live back into your device. And then the last one here, which is live.remote, this will let me take over a control. In this case, I'm taking over the volume control, and I can control it now with the number box. I've got a number box in my Max for Live device, but you can see that it's actually taking over the volume, and I can't control the volume with my mouse anymore. Again, probably one of the most simple demonstrations of working with the Live API. And you might have seen a lot of the devices that come with Ableton Live already, things like LFO, envelope follow, and so on. And they would use these kind of objects to kind of create those things. So you could, instead of having a number box, have a waveform controlling this. So you've got like an LFO, like a sine wave controlling that. Okay, so that's some really simple, just some of the objects we use when we use the Live API. I'm not going to go through all of these, but let me show you just something you can do that's quite useful then. So let's say you spend a lot of time, you work out how to actually construct things in the Live API. What can you do with it that you can't, that isn't as straightforward just in Ableton Live on its own? So on track 4, you'll see that I've got some drum loops here. So I'll just quickly play these. So I've got a full loop there, then I've got some little cuts from it, just isolated little sections. Okay, so this is a common thing. You might start with like some kind of loop and then cut bits out of it, and you end up with a track where you've got lots of different clips, like loop sections or variations of their original loop. Let's go back to the first one. And the device I've made here then, this is using the Live API to basically access the properties of a clip. So I'll open this device up in a moment, but what it's doing is this device it's going specifically to this track, track 4. It's going into the select, whichever clip is currently playing, and it's going to control the pitch here. So the pitch allows me to repitch or retune the clip. So I can do things like this. So pitching up and down, and if we use this instead, I can now use my device here to do the same thing. So I've gone down by 7 semitones. Now you might think, well, why would you do that? You can just go into the clip and you can change it there, fine. But when you've got these situations where you've got maybe like 5 or 6 variations of the same clip, maybe you want to apply the same setting to each one. So this one just has a simple button that lets you say, right, here's the setting I've got, -7 semitones, click all clips, and now every clip has got the same value applied. So as you play through, and it wouldn't matter whether that's just 5 clips or 100 clips. This would essentially let you apply that same setting to all the clips on the same track. So you could build something that's just like a little functional time-saving device based on what you want to do. For me, that was just something useful, something I'd use when I'm kind of sampling and cutting up audio files. Just a nice little quick button, and using the Live API let me do that. Let's open up another project. Okay, so here's another one. Let me just move people out of the way. So this one, I'll just bring up actually a really useful resource if you're going to start working with the Live API, and it's called the Live Object Model. So it looks like this. This is actually the old one. So the Live Object Model is essentially like a roadmap from your Max for Live device into the Ableton Live application. So you have these you have like 4 starting points. You either start with the live application, the live set, or control surface. Live set is the common one. That's the starting point, is the actual live set that you're working on, or the project in Ableton you're working on. And you'll probably see some familiar terminology here, like we're talking about tracks, scenes, devices, mixer devices, clips and clip slots, and so on. And when you find something in here, let's say I want to work on the scene. So the scenes are over here. I can trigger whole scenes in Ableton Live. So if I click on scene, it takes me down, and you'll get all the useful information to do with a scene. I'm just going to go to the current one, actually. There we go. So let's go down to scene. Now this has changed recently. I'm not sure if this is being updated or if this is actually the new look of the Live API, but it looks very different to what we've had before. But let's see if I can find my way through this. I'll just do it manually. So you can see there's a massive list of all of the different, what are called live objects, things in live that you can actually control, and all their related kind of sort of what are called properties and functions. This is a bit scary to begin with, because when I first looked at this, it didn't really make any sense. I didn't know what anything could do, and there wasn't a lot of documentation around to support it. And the documentation here wasn't always super intuitive, but it has got better over the years. Let's just tell you what, I'm going to try and find it up here. It's going to be easier. There we go, scene. So at the moment, I'm in this live object model, and I'm looking at scene, and I'm looking at all the different things I can do with a scene in Ableton Live. So I can change or get properties from the scene, but also there's what are called functions, and functions are very much like doing commands, and they're like messages you could send to an object to control something on a scene. In this particular one, we've got a function called fire. And what that does, all that simply does, is it fires the scene. So fire is like pressing one of these buttons here and playing the scene. Okay, so it's just like playing back a scene. But if I go into the device that I've got here, you'll see I've got this like sequencer device. Let me open this up. And what we've got here, I'm not going to go through all of the patching here. I think that's all covered in much more detail on the course. But what you'll notice at the bottom is I'm using this function called fire, and you see I've got a couple of numbers after it, 1 and 0. And the reason I've put them in there is when I was looking through the Live API, or I was looking through the Live Object Model, I noticed there's some extra parameters. So as well as firing a scene, as well as launching a scene from a Max for Live device and kind of automating that to happen, there's some extra things you can put in. So one is you could force legato, and it tells us it's a bool, which means we either say 1 or 0 to turn it off or on. And this is a really cool thing, because this is something that's not as straightforward to do in Ableton Live itself. And what it actually means is I've got a load of loops here. These are all, I think, 8-bar, 4-bar loops. And let's say you wanted to play one of these loops, and then you want the next one to come in, but you don't want the next one to come in starting at the beginning. You want it to come in on the second beat or the fourth or something. So you want it to kind of carry on in the same order. You can do that with clips. You can have clip legato, but it's not very straightforward to do it with playing scenes. But this simple little option, just adding an extra number here, tells me to force legato mode. And what that meant is, as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh, I could build I can make a sequencer to control the scenes. So if we take a look at this now, turn this device on, what you'll see I've got a little sequencer, and each of these blocks, they're from the lowest point to the highest point, they determine which scene is playing back. So if I start again, hopefully you'll see what's going on. So I'm able to like sequence different scenes, but it keeps the flow of the loop. So if I was to reset these all to the bottom, we would just hear the first scene playing. So that just plays through. But if I wanted to bring in a different loop, like the next scene 2 there, so you're able to like do some really, just quite fun things. And the beauty of this is it's working with scenes. So even if I had like 10 tracks on the go, it would do that same thing. It would force legato, playing back all the different scenes at the same time. So that's pretty cool, being able to do little things like that. Let's have a look at this one. Okay, so this is a relatively new addition to the Live API. And it's all documented in online. I'd also recommend, actually, as well as using the live object model here, just using the Max for Live documentation is really useful. So going to things like the Live API overview, this has a really good overview for all the, how to work with it. Again, we cover all this on the course as well. So this is a new addition. This is part of the API. This is new to Live 11. So this, what I'm showing you now, is only available in Live 11. And it's the option to, through the Live API, route multiple route MIDI tracks into a Max for Live audio effect and, I believe, instrument. So what you'll see here, let's play this back for a moment. Okay, so I've got some loops on the go there. On track 3, I've got this white noise happening. So that's just a bit of an audio file. And then on the track, I've got this little device that I've made that essentially lets me do, it lets me grab MIDI from another track in Ableton Live. So if you think about how you usually have the input-output section of Live, you can route audio and MIDI, to different audio MIDI tracks, but you can't really route MIDI into an audio track and do something with it. Just doesn't, it's a completely different, obviously, format, but we can do it now with through the Live API. So what I've got on this track, I can actually demo it here. So I'm on track 3, which is part 3, which is an audio track. Track 5, which is called MIDI patterns, you'll see that that's actually a MIDI track and it contains some MIDI clips. Okay, so this is a MIDI track. There's nothing else on it, by the way. There's no device on it. It's just MIDI clips. If I go back to my audio track, on here I've got a device to demonstrate this. I can pick any of the MIDI kind of inputs to come into it, and one of them will be any MIDI tracks you've got available in Live. So I pick on this, and then it essentially lets me pull MIDI into the audio effect. So then what I've done is I've took it a bit further, and over here I'm going to choose MIDI patterns. Okay, so now I've got audio coming in. Let's bypass it. So it shows me the white noise coming through, and when I've got it working, I can play a MIDI clip, and these MIDI clips just have like a quarter note pattern, for example. So it's a really simple audio gate. It's letting me, it's a MIDI controlled audio gate. It lets me take MIDI from one track, pull it into this device directly, and then use the MIDI notes to open and close an audio gate. So there we've got a quarter note pattern. Let's do an eighth note. Okay, so really simple, but that's a really nice new feature. Back in Live 10, when that came out, we have a similar thing for audio. So again, through the Live API, and the programming is almost identical. You can route multiple audio tracks into a single Max for Live device. But now we can do almost a similar thing with MIDI. We can route MIDI into Max for Live audio effects. So there's some really good potential there for, like, side chaining kind of audio effects through MIDI, that kind of thing. So that's pretty cool. And then let's quickly take a look at this one. Okay, so this one, this is a device I made for a company called Audiair, and it's just like a drum sequencer. It's just the sequence part, actually. The drum machine is, well, the drum part, the audio is still using a drum rack. So I'll just play this back. So it's kind of like a polyrhythmic drum sequencer, but the API side, where the API side is interesting, is as well as the pattern sequencer for the drums, I've also got an effects sequencer. So what we wanted to do, we really liked how the drum racks in Live let you have, like, 8, and now you can have more macros to control things like just any of the effects on there, or so we can control this, and we wanted to be able to sequence this really easily. So what we've done with the Live API here is we've made it so we've got a single map button, and you might have seen these map buttons on some of the Max for Live devices that come with Ableton Live that let you map an LFO to any parameter you want, really. So what we've done map, but it maps all of these 8 macros to the 8 macros of the drum rack automatically. So you click map, and there you go. It gets their current value, it gets their name, and it essentially takes over. So you'll see that this is now controlling the filter, and this is controlling the drive. And then the reason we've done that is because in here we've got a sequencer to control these. So if I go to the sequencer for the filter and turn it on, now this sequence at the bottom is controlling the filter cutoff. Just increase the amount. And then we can draw in different shapes to kind of get different sort of variations. And then we can go through every different parameter, turn on its own sequencer, and have sort of different values. Okay, so the sequencer part isn't really about the API, it's more how we've used it to take over. So through the API, we're able to use, it was a live.remote, which we saw in one of the first patches, essentially taking over existing parameters in Ableton Live, but it's how you can do it. You can obviously click map and select a parameter, or you can do some interesting things like we've done here, where we say, if there's a drum rack next to you, get the parameters or take over the parameters of that drum rack, and you can be really specific about what you want it to do and make things work as easy as possible for you. The very last thing I'm going to show you then, I'm not sure how long I've been talking, but the last thing I want to show you, this is probably one of my favorite things to do with the Live API, and this is something I've been doing for the past probably 5 or 6 years. So I've been working with a developer called Isotonic Studios, who really specialize in Max for Live. And what I do with them is I've made a few packs called the Arcade series, where I'm making sequences. They're like just quirky sequences, all based on old arcade games, but they all work with control surfaces. So you might have noticed, if I go back to the live object model, again, I'm looking at the old one, it's just a bit easier to view at the moment. You'll see that I mentioned that you have these different starting points. So when you start building a Max for Live device that uses the API, you have a starting point like the live set, which is, this is from the starting point is your live set, and then you kind of drill down into different parts of the live set to figure out which parameters or which things you want to take over, what you want to control. So for example, you'd start at your song, your overall live set, and you'd go to a track, and then from there you go to a mixer and the mute button, for example. But you might have noticed as well control surfaces. So this API and the way it works, it also is extended to any supported control surfaces. So when you're in Ableton Live and you look in the control surface list, we have all these control surfaces. So for a lot of these, there'll be things that you can actually do with these. You can take over these controllers using the Live API in the same way that I've been taking over different parts of Ableton Live. So at the moment, I'm using a launchpad. I'm just going to give you a demo of the device so you get what it's doing, and then I'll show you, I'll switch my video so you can see the launchpad. So this device is called Arkanoid. And let's place back. So I can basically, so it's like a diagonal sequencer, which is a bit unusual. You can have up to 4 balls bouncing around this little diagonal, this little square kind of grid. And when they hit any of the kind of selected spots, they kind of generate a note. Okay, let's just stop those a sec. Okay, so that's what that device does. And then all these devices, they let you show this or control this grid on a supported controller. So that's things like Launchpad and Push, Native Instruments Machine, that kind of thing. I think what I'll do is I might stop sharing my screen and then show you my camera. Hopefully that works. Oh no, I still need to share sound. I'll keep it on here. Let me take this camera and hopefully you can see. I'll try and keep a steady hand. There we go. I've got a little Launchpad Mark II. And what I was able to do, if I go to the device and I can pick the Launchpad from here. So you can see on the screen, I've got the device and it can show me any of the supported control surfaces I've got loaded up, and the device I've developed uses the API to say, yes, select the Launchpad, and essentially lets me take control of it. So the things I can do then is I can completely repurpose what all of these buttons do. I can change their colors, I can receive their inputs straight into my Max for Live device. If I have this playing, I've got it so if I go to user mode 2 on the Launchpad, then the grid here represents the grid that's on my Max for Live device. So let's press play again. And now I can use the Launchpad to interact with the sequencer. Let's choose the blue one. We'll put in some step lines. I can choose the blue one. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea how that's working. But for me, that's a really powerful thing. So using the Live API, you can not just repurpose what parts of Ableton Live do with Max for Live device, but you can actually, in a way, hack controllers in the safest possible way, just using the API, and get them to do different things, like rather than just being session mode or a keyboard, you can actually turn them into whatever you want them to be, really. So yeah, that's my little bit of introduction into the Live API. Again, please check the course out, because there's a lot more of the actually how do you actually do it, how do you get started and start building up devices from there. But yeah, I'll stop sharing and try to answer any questions.
So there was a question in the chat from Carl about the API and whether it is if it allows to write graphics to the push to Matrix screen.
Not directly through the Live API, but you can do it. Check out Sigabort, Lee, who works with Isotonic, because I think he was one of the first people I knew that did this. So Sigabort, I can try and find a link to his stuff. I think he released something that does this. I'm not sure if it's through the API or not though. So yeah, I do see another question. I've always wanted to stop a Mac sequencer and launching a clip on the track sequencer. Is it stored? Yeah, you could do that with the API. So you're saying that whenever you launch a clip on a track, you want the sequencer to be able to stop start. So the kind of things you can do, yeah, you can watch, you can say something like, if any clip is playing on a track, get a notification and then do something with that notification, like stop or start your sequencer. So yes, you could absolutely do that. In fact, I think there's one of the devices on the course that I've done with Music Hackspace where we're doing something similar, where we're doing stuff with transport, with a sequencer and with live transport and with clips playing. So there might be something in there for you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mark.
All right. So yeah, I've been doing looping. I've been after the perfect looper like everyone else for almost 10 years inside of Ableton. So I'm constantly iterating and looking for ways to offload things that I have to do. It's in the middle of improv. I want to be thinking as little as possible. So I use a couple different MIDI controllers. The FCB 1010 for my feet. I've got a couple MIDI twisters. And recently I've been realizing the power of TouchOS, especially the new Mark II that's coming online. But even the old one, it's pretty powerful, especially when combined with Max for Live. And because it allows you to use the API to monitor what's going on in the set, and then spit out information onto the iPad, and then vice versa. You can use the iPad to touch buttons and then change what's going on behind the scenes in Ableton. So I don't know how many people here are familiar with ClyphX. It's kind of like, so there's two sides to the API. There's Max for Live, and then there's the control surface API that Mark talked about. So ClyphX basically takes everything that's available inside the LOM document, and then it has its own Bible, which is basically a much simplified abstraction of all of the different parts of the Ableton API, made for, it's extremely human readable. So basically almost everything that you can do inside of the API from Max for Live can be easily done by renaming a clip, or you can assign these to different buttons, these actions to different buttons on MIDI controllers. I'll give you a simple example of how I used Max for Live to make accessing ClyphX actions really easy. And I use this all the time. So this little device is simply a key map button here, and up pops a Max window. And inside of here, you can put any of the ClyphX commands to try out different actions. For instance, if I wanted to change the color of all of my tracks, I write all for addressing all tracks, and you can see how easy it is to abstract the Ableton API with this. Type in color and then choose a number between 1 and 64, I think. You can see instantly all my track colors change. Or you know, what's another example? Get the metronome going, turn it off. Basically, you can control all of Ableton through this simple little window that pops up. I find it very useful for just trying out different commands with ClyphX. So that's one of the ways that I've used Max for Live to interact with the API. I'll open it up real quick here so you can see what's going on. Extremely simple, because the creator of ClyphX left a documentation guide for how to use ClyphX with Max for Live. And left a few, like this piece of code here, this piece of JavaScript code. This comes with your ClyphX purchase for addressing ClyphX commands inside of my Max for Live. So it's a very simple device, very useful. I find myself using it all the time. Let's see here. So I don't have like anything formal. I just wanted to show what I thought was cool, what was possible. This is a problem that I had for a long time. And through Max for Live, I was able to solve it. So inside of the control surface API only is the ability to store information inside of the live set XML. So the developer of ClyphX made it possible to snap any parameter, snapshot any parameters inside of Ableton and quickly recall them. So I'll show, and we have the macro variations now, but let's say I wanted to snap this volume on this track, and maybe also the send at that level. So using ClyphX, I can address track 3. And you can see where these are at now. Now, when I want, I can move these around anywhere. And then I can just recall. So now you can see they snapped right back to where they were. Well, you can do that with any parameter inside of Ableton, any track, any volume. And that's a pretty incredible thing to have access to, just in the moment when you're performing, to have access to just quick snapshots of anything, not just macro variations. And so I use this a lot for my effects racks because I don't want to have to turn the knobs back all the time to where they were. No one's going to remember that, where they were. But also have access to volume, and snaps actually even do clips, play status. So you can make up your own variations of scenes with snap recall actions too, because it'll recall what was playing when you snapped it, which is extremely valuable information to have. But you can see this kind of clumsy to have to open up a window like this or rename a clip and recall it that way. I wanted something that was going to be able to create the snapshot of whatever I wanted. And then I wanted to be able to see that that snapshot was created, and then to be able to recall it whenever I wanted easily. So I hope I'm making sense here. Back to that XML document, the only way to have access to this snap data that gets written inside of the live set is to use the control surface API. So ClyphX also allows you to make user actions with Python to modify the way ClyphX works. So I made a little user action here. I don't know if you can see it inside of Python, that basically says, whenever a new snapshot is created, take the name of that snapshot, sort it, all the snapshots, and write it to the name of this clip. And as far as I know, there's no character limit inside of clips. So this can just keep going and going and going and going and going. So what I'm able to do with that then is, inside of Max for Live, listen to the name of this clip and then spit out the names of all the different snapshots. And what you're seeing here is my iPad, to certain buttons on the iPad. So whenever a new one is created, I'm going to touch this snap button here. Let's see. Oh, I have to load the device first. I purposefully left it off. To show you how easy it is to work with OSC information. So my device is pretty simple. You basically have to, inside of TouchOS, it's after 3 pieces of information here. So the send address, send port and the receive port. And then as soon as I, fingers crossed, hit the reset button here, yeah, it will reflect that there are no snapshots from my text file in the file. I do have a snapshot that I created, but it's not one that works with this system. So in fact, I'm just going to delete that snapshot. So you can see there's no snapshots that are related to this text file that works with this device. Okay, so I'm going to create a snapshot by pushing this button here on my iPad. And then it instantly shows me, thanks to this Max for Live device, that I have one and that it's ready to recall. And down here in this text file, you can see that I've snapped the parameters on track 3. So I can turn any of these I want now in performance. Let's we can get this going. Get a filter. And here, I'll delete this snapshot. And then I'll snap that again. Bring it back. And then when I hit this recall button, my volume just snaps right back to where it was. So I can create several different snaps. I just deleted that one. We'll create a dry snap. That's kind of nice to have to get back to totally dry signal. And I'll create one with that filter down, maybe some volume down. And then I'll create maybe one with some beat repeat, some crush, and then bring it back to the dry. And I can just bounce around between these different snapshots. I don't want the volume down on that third snapshot. It doesn't really make sense. But yeah, so you can kind of do that a little bit with macro variations. But the difference with macro variations is you only get this audio effect direct or this instrument. With snapshots, you get play status of clips, volume, send, you get record automation button status, you get mute button status. You basically have access to everything. And with this iPad setup and Max for Live, you can instantly jump around to these different snapshots. This is just a simple demo. You can have literally pages and pages of these buttons full of snapshots if you want. This is just to show you a little example demo. So that's for those who are still with me. It's nice to be able to have instant recall of parameters, but it can be a little jarring if it just slams if it slams hard to, for instance, a filter all the way down instead of a nice ramp. So there is this morphing capability inside of ClyphX that allows you to smoothly ramp all of these parameters. They interpolate depending on how much time is left in, how many beats are left in the snap ramp parameter that you've set, or how many milliseconds are left in the ramp parameter. I'll demonstrate what I'm talking about. So instead of just this jarring back and forth between these two, there's a way to slowly morph between them. And you can determine how much time goes between the morphing with these parameters here. And I wrote a couple of user actions for this to work. Basically, I would like my morphing automation to end on the 1 of the next bar, always around the 1. I think it's a very, when you're looping or when you're performing, even the audience sort of expects changes to finish and end, you know, with the 1 being kind of a beginning. So if I press some of these modifiers, the snap ramp will ramp smoothly, whereas ramps and jumps between different beats as it interpolates. It'll make more sense when you see what I'm talking about. So I have snap ramp, the modifier pushed, the number 4 pushed. So when I morph between, when I press these different recall buttons, you can see on my audio effect track here. Let's get the music going so you can see it landing on the 1. When I hit recall 3, everything should finish on the 1 of the next bar. And let's get this going. Ends there. If I hold down the bass button, it'll end on the 1 of the bar after. So there we go. You can see it there. 1. So it makes this morphing almost more musical in a way. It's not this jarring slamming of parameters. And it doesn't just have to be these 2. It's just for the demo. You can literally put any number of beats that these will return to your previous snap. And you can jump back and forth with this smooth morphing feature or turn it off. It doesn't really matter. And then hold down this snap delete button and start all over again if you'd like. So I think I'm going to stop here. I don't know if anyone is still listening. Or if I'm making any sense. This is my first time doing something like this. I'm just going to get a little feedback and yeah, I guess see if there's any questions and maybe we can chat more in a breakout room later. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's very, very cool.